Hi, this is Kimberly. This is a synopsis of Chapter 6 of the book Letters from Christopher, Tragic Confessions of the Watts Family Murders, books by Sherilyn Cadle, and this chapter is entitled The Mistress. Alright, in this chapter, I was completely taken off guard by the first sentence. If it was done that way for its shock value, then it certainly did its job. Truth be known, I had to stop reading and compose myself. This is what it said. Christopher has not told the FBI, but as soon as Nikki told him she wanted to have a first with him, he started planning on how he could kill the baby so he could give Nikki their first together. When I read that, it just, I don't know why, because I've been following this case for a long time, but it just floored me. I had to stop reading and I went to bed. This was night before last. I mean, what the hell? Chris is such a highly disturbed person. That's not even the right words. But this chapter, The Mistress, was only 3.5 pages in the book. I know there's a whole lot more to The Mistress than that. Instead of how the relationship began and that sort of thing, we get the Reader's Digest version of the 2 times Nikki came to Chris's house. Supposedly, the second time she was there, Dieter led Nikki up the stairs. Okay, and NK, Nikki, then saw pictures of the family. My guess is the house looked like a mansion in comparison to her apartment. And don't tell me Nikki didn't poke her head into all the bedrooms upstairs, and especially into Shanann's office. I wish Shanann had like a camera in there that, you know, would click on and go to her phone, but my mind started to wander while I was reading this. I don't know. Anyway, what it wandered to is I remembered an excerpt from this book promoting it on Facebook that I had saw weeks ago. And this was before the Letters from Christopher Facebook page was taken down. Through gossip, I've heard that it was taken down because people were flipping out over the non-delivery of their books that they pre-ordered through Dorrance Publishing for $19 plus shipping. I think the shipping was maybe $7. I could be wrong. And it was $12 at Walmart with free shipping. And the people that pre-ordered got their books last. So people were mad. I don't blame them. I wasn't even going to read this book, but there started to be so much controversy, I had to look into it more. But back to my bit that I was telling you about the excerpt I got, or that I saw on Facebook. I got a message from someone, or a comment rather, on one of my videos, and it said, and I quote, "About to drop a book. Will you do a documentary on it?" And that was it. And will, in the second sentence, as in will you do a documentary on it, was not capitalized. And there was no period, or there was no question mark at the end. It was a period. And then there was a link provided. So I clicked on the link, went down the rabbit hole, and I read one sentence, the very first sentence that was promoting the book, and it had bad grammar. So I laughed and left and just was like, whatever. And I remember it saying something about Nikki being froze on the stairs instead of frozen. I had no idea at the time that this author had actually been corresponding with Chris Watts himself. I just thought it was another one of those copy-paste from the Discovery books that I've seen on Amazon. There's been a lot of those. And truth be known, I do think some of this book is copy and paste from the Discovery. But I'm getting away from this chapter. This very short chapter where the author wildly skips over so many important things, in my opinion. Remember, it's entitled The Mistress. So after Shanann and the girls went to North Carolina, Nikki went into full-scale pursuing Chris mode. She wanted him to stay at her place all the time. She did not include him in her group of friends to begin with, but that was coming later. And that's all that's said about that. The author says that Nikki was at the Watts house twice, once on July 4th and once on July 14th. She tells the story that we've already heard in the February Wisconsin interview that Chris did with CBI and FBI about Shanann was blowing up his phone on the morning of July 4th. And so he stepped outside at Nikki's apartment where he had slept over the night before and was talking to her. And then he said that he had to go home. And she got really pissed off. I guess they were supposed to do something that day, and It just made me wonder if Shanann was wanting to FaceTime with Chris or something. And of course, he wouldn't be able to do that at Nikki's apartment. Anyway, he went home and it pissed the hell out of Nikki, and she didn't like being the side chick. Those are my words, not the author's, about being a side chick. But anyway, he went home and she showed up later with the ruse of helping him with a protein diet plan. And it seems like she started to worry, says the author, if he was considering going back with his family. She had had him to herself for over a week, and now he was back on his turf. And 𝐂𝐡𝐢𝐥𝐝 says, she knew if he was alone in that house with all of the memories and pictures of his family, he might decide his life was too good to give up. How does Mrs. 𝐂𝐡𝐢𝐥𝐝 know this? Did she interview Nikki? I highly doubt it. Did Chris tell her this? Maybe. If he did, how does he know this? Is that what Nikki told him? I have many unanswered questions. I always did ask a lot of questions, and it drove my parents crazy when I was a kid. It's mentioned in the discovery during the interview with Shanann's friend Cassie. Within the first week of Shanann being in North Carolina, she and Chris were not even talking on the phone much. Well, that would be because Chris and Nikki were spending every minute together. He spent the night at her place every night. They worked at the same company, so they were pretty much together during the day. If he was in the office, they would spend weekends together. And I mean, I find it hard that Nikki believed she was under the impression of them getting a divorce. As much time as Chris and Shanann did speak on the phone and texting and stuff, and of course he always had to step away from Nikki when he was talking to her. July 14th, 𝐂𝐡𝐢𝐥𝐝 says they went to the Shelby Museum, and I'm a stickler for correct details, so I looked this up, and yes, it's a museum, but it's called the Shelby American Collection, and it's in Boulder, and I'm just wondering, why not include little interesting tidbits like that? Anyway, they stopped by Chris's house afterwards, and before going out to get something to eat. This is when Dieter led her upstairs. And that's in quotes, led her upstairs. The only dog I've seen lead people anywhere is Lassie. Now, I don't have a dog, but I did many years ago and when I was a kid, and they always followed me around, not the other way, with the dog taking me places. So I just can't picture Dieter showing Nikki the house. And if I remember correctly from when I went to the Facebook page one time, the Letters from Christopher Facebook page, there was an excerpt that said that Nikki realized the family would be, quote, broke to pieces because of the affair. And that was an excerpt I found before the release. And it's since been corrected in this version that I have. And I just wonder if it was because so many people mentioned on the Facebook page that the book was filled with bad grammar that books were late in going out. It's just a thought I had. But then supposedly Nikki flopped on the couch and was being all sad and stuff after the house tour. She started questioning Chris if he was really wanting to give all of this up, etc. And he mentioned casually that right before he met her, he and Shanann had been trying for a baby. Well, she just flipped the hell out on him and started dropping the F-bomb. She stormed out of the house and sat in her truck outside. And they furiously texted one another back and forth for about 30 minutes while she sat out in front of the house. Supposedly, this is when Chris talked her off the cliff. And also mentioned in this chapter is that Nikki took some medications and Chris believed her to be bipolar. And then when she was sitting in the front of the house texting, I wonder if Dieter was perched on the back of the couch looking out the window and laughing at her. I bet he was pleased with himself, showing her pictures and stuff that then, having it cause an argument between the cheating Chris and his mistress. Dieter knew she wasn't supposed to be there, and I just wish Dieter could have been interviewed by the detectives. But Chris told Nikki he didn't want another baby with Shanann. Apparently, this is a statement that calmed her down. The author states that he failed to mention that Shanann was already pregnant. And So I was looking in the Discovery in the interview that they did with Shanann's friend Cassie. The Discovery said it was Chris that wanted a third child. He is the one that talked Shanann into having a third child. And Cassie always said before Shanann left for North Carolina, she and Chris were having sex 3 times a day. Shanann told Cassie that Chris just couldn't get enough of her. Well, I think that's because he was doing some heavy-duty flirting with Nicole at that time, 𝐂𝐡𝐢𝐥𝐝. I'm not sure of exactly when their relationship started. It should mention it in this chapter, but it doesn't. Discovery says that on June 14th, Chris Watts enters co-worker Nicole 𝐂𝐡𝐢𝐥𝐝's contact information into his phone. Well, it just so happens that June 14th, when he did this, that was the exact same day that Shanann recorded the video of Bella singing the Daddy song. So anyway, Nikki went on for the rest of the day, July 14th, and acted like nothing happened after Chris talked her off the cliff. She was having her bipolar episode. They went back to her place and quote-unquote made love. I've never heard of Chris describe it that way, so maybe this is the author's interpretation. The author said, quote, he felt the guilt rush back to him and he really didn't want to be there, end quote. Found that very interesting. But after this session of lovemaking, in which Nikki did her best to make it hot and passionate, this is when Nicole told him, and the author quoted Nikki as saying, quote, I got mad because I thought I could give you your first son. When you told me you and your wife were trying to have a baby, that made me really mad and it scared me, end quote. This is supposedly a direct quote from Nicole 𝐂𝐡𝐢𝐥𝐝. So how is the author able to provide this quote? She doesn't say it's from Miss 𝐂𝐿𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐥𝐝. She doesn't say it's from Chris relaying it. It's just a quote from, supposedly from Nikki. And I know that I'm picking apart this book and this author. That was never my intention when I started this synopsis series. I was just going to provide a short summary of each chapter, but I know it's turned into this. But it's annoying me that she seems to have rushed through this book. It was only 8 months from her first letter that she wrote to Chris and then to the book release. That's a short period of time, really. And remember, it was a month later from her first letter that she heard from Chris, of which she didn't answer his letter, prompting him to tell his mother on her. So Cindy called Mrs. 𝐂𝐡𝐢𝐥𝐝. So yeah, this seems to be a rush job. No, I've never written a book. I know people will say that, but I did have a short stint as a newspaper reporter and staff writer for the newspaper. So when quoting people, I always had to be very careful, and this is probably why it sticks out to me. Excuse me, I have a cold if I sound funny, or funnier than usual. But Nikki supposedly said, quote, I got mad because I thought I could give you your first son, end quote. And supposedly she didn't even know Shanann was pregnant because Chris said he didn't tell her, much less being pregnant with a boy. So the sex of the baby had not been discovered yet. That wasn't discovered until August 8th when she had that 3D ultrasound or 4D. And this conversation about wanting to give him his first son took place July 14th, 25 days beforehand. I hope you follow what I'm trying to say here. Chris insisted they were getting a divorce, so I don't understand this statement Nikki supposedly made. He said they were trying to have a baby. He didn't tell her she was pregnant, much less tell her she was pregnant with a boy. So something doesn't sound right here to me. And then remember, the first sentence of this chapter was, Christopher has not told the FBI, but as soon as Nikki told him she wanted to have a first with him, he started planning how he could kill the baby so he could give Nikki their first together. So, I mean, first what, boy? First baby? I mean, the sex of the baby hadn't been discovered yet, and supposedly that's when he started planning. So either words are twisted or something. And then supposedly she's quoting things that Nicole 𝐂𝐡𝐢𝐥𝐝 said, but I don't know that she interviewed Nicole Kessinger. So actually, if this were in court, it would be hearsay, which wouldn't be admissible. Anyway, I'm confusing myself even, but all the while Shanann was trying to save their marriage. She begged him to talk to her, to be more descriptive of his thoughts and wants, but he was being very passive-aggressive with her. He wouldn't cooperate, and he was too chicken to tell her that he wasn't interested in fixing things. I wanted to know more. For example, how did Chris and Nikki act together at work? I don't know if more is coming in future chapters, so I can't complain too much, I guess, at this point. But 𝐂𝐡 says in this chapter, after that happened, she said the sex was down to 1 to 2 times daily. How does she know Kessinger said that? Was that in the discovery? Did she talk to Nikki? Like, how does she know that is what I want to know. I doubt that she actually talked to Nicole Kessinger. So she doesn't say where she gets her information. And as I mentioned last time, that drives me crazy. And then the last sentence in the chapter mentions vaguely that they went to the Bandimere races, which I looked it up, and I lived in Colorado for 4 years, so some of these places are familiar to me, and I had been there, so I knew it was called Bandimere Speedway, but she misspelled it. But the last sentence in this chapter mentions they went to the Bandimere races on July 21st and camping in the mountains July 28th and 29th. Period. There is so much more to the story. For example, NK is a geologist. Chris has a keen interest in cars, so it looked to me as though they were taking turns with each other's interests. And the author called it camping in the mountains, and while this is technically true, the place they went to was called the Great Dunes National Park. I looked this up, as the author should have done, in my opinion, to make sure she had the correct make sure I had the correct spellings is something I would have done. But there's a huge backstory to this Great Sand Dunes National Park and how it came to be. So that is something that would interest Nikki as a geologist. And then they camp at Zapata Falls Campground. Why not mention this? It deserved more than one sentence combining those 2 weekends together. So I know I've been chattering on, and it would have actually taken me less time to read the chapter word for word than it did for me to go off track trying to describe it. I was sort of surprised how the chapter entitled The Mistress was so short and offered so little. The chapter left me very unsettled. It's incomplete for one, and I spent a lot of time cross-referencing it with the discovery. But I'm just thinking, what a golden opportunity this author had. I know I'm being critical and rude, but if I had been given this opportunity, it probably would have taken me at least a couple of years to write this book. In fact, this case is so complex, it would have taken a team to compile all the information and cross-reference it. And it should, to me, would be a very long book, and I wouldn't even want to tackle something so complex. But this is where I'm going to step down from my soapbox and end this video, and I will pick it up in chapter 7 in the next one. Much love and peace. Thank you for listening.